Good afternoon, everyone. Greyhaster here with another P3 podcast. We have three very illustrious guests with us today. We have Haden, a CDP contributor. We have Lord Willow, who you all know and so needs no further introduction. And we also have a new console player, Angli, who streams too late oftentimes for me to watch, but very, very well knowledge. Say hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Hello.
So we're gonna, since Hayden's new to this, we're gonna, and Angli is too as well, but Haden, since we're talking about rewards today, what was the rewards suggestion on the CDP that you most liked and you thought deserves some more attention?
Oh boy, you do hit it right out of the gate, don't you? It's kind of a difficult pick because most of the discussion was along the lines that we all know and have felt before, right? That the rewards should match the difficulty of the dungeon and such things. So in one sense, it was quite clear consensus about what players actually expect, and I don't think there were too many different voices about going it totally different way. So, and I tend to agree with the consensus in a sense that while it is very desirable to have those random drops of worthwhile chase gear that you kind of hope for a drop each run, it kind of also is a bit of a turn off if you run a dungeon or any content multiple times and all you get is worthless, basically refinement points and gear that you only can turn into refinement points. So, I mean, the overall suggestion to fix this as soon as it's feasible kind of has to be my go-to answer.
So basically you're saying, so I mean, one of the things that was kind of in there was about if there's an RNG way of taking an item, a pity currency should exist, right?
But I wouldn't even call it pity currency. I mean, they have the almost perfect solution already in the rework of refinement system and those wards, right? Preservation wards. So in essence, what they're doing, I thought it was very clever. I still think it's very clever. So you have the random chance for each try, but eventually you will kind of fill up the meter and you will succeed automatically. As I would translate into the rewards would be that we collect basically the seals at the same time as we roll for the chase items on each run, right? So eventually either you get enough seals or any store currency, but they would be some kind of seal type thing, right? Eventually you have enough seals to go into the store and buy what you actually want. Or if you get lucky before that, you actually get the drop out of the dungeon and you're happy. And I think actually Tom weapons function exactly like that. So you have a chance each completion, but eventually you do your 20 completions and you have enough of the whatever currency it's called to actually go and buy them, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm saying this is very, very easy to replicate to the rest of the dungeons and the rest of the content.
Okay. Willow, any opinions on that?
Yes. I mean that rolls right directly into kind of the superstore idea that we had talked about previously, and I also kind of posted that on the forums, both under the VIP and this, and I'm for removing even seals from dungeon, all but the newest content. Anything that I think, in my personal opinion, I think anything that's RNG based should be able to be purchased with currency as well, and basically make one currency store to handle all of that. Now you can run whatever content you want to have. You tune the currency reward based on the difficulty, right? And so players won't experience again I have to run this content for a year before I get the RNG drop I'm after, right? I know players that still haven't gotten the Shard of Orcus wand out of CN after hundreds of runs and thousands of runs, right? That's just an example.
I totally agree, but I would like to point out that actually the Superstore currency would also be a seal. It functions basically as the seal currency, right?
Exactly. You're just renaming it.
So before I get to Angli's opinion on this, so do either of you think that like when we talk about the superstore currency and purchasing stuff from the superstore, are we thinking that it should be bound to account, bound to character, like, or like able to be sold on the EH?
I think most things should be bound to account. I think there's definitely things in there that should be unbound, but they should be uh, the lesser expensive, more common acquisition type of stuff. But rarer things like mounts, companions, stuff like that should probably be bound.
Okay. Angli, what's your take on it?
So wholeheartedly agree with the like the superstore situation, and with what Haden was saying about kind of how the refining goes now, where you fill up that meter. But also, I think that there's just some things that they could do to make running dungeons more worthwhile. Like, um, for instance, we just had the double refining stones, and I have never seen more dungeon runs than during double refining. But then basically the rest of the year it's pretty quiet, other than the shout outs for the occasional Loam, occasional Tom, things like that. And it's because some of those legacy dungeons are just not worth running at this point. Whereas if you were to, say remove those refinement RP loot holders, aka the crap gear that we get, and replace them with something else. Give us companions, give us companion reroll or companion upgrade tokens, give us mounts, just give us things that, like, if they're not going to help us, we can at least sell them to buy the things that we need to help us, and just replacing them with something else if you don't want to do this whole superstore aspect. But I think just removing the gear because nobody wants it, because it doesn't stack up, is only half the battle. You have to put something in its place to actually make it worth removing.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. So, you've had Avernus now for a few weeks, or like the journey to Avernus. What do you think of?
I haven't. I'm on console, so I don't get that till Tuesday.
Oh, is it really? I thought it was already out for you guys.
Launches on Tuesday.
Oh, well, I mean, so then, sorry. Then
go ahead and ask. Go ahead and ask.
Do you think the Juma bags, like, because it has a different loot table than most of the other ones, like the Juma bags, like, have pretty much been, I think, a positive thing. Like, even though, like, the chests at the end of IC, the dungeon, has been pretty miserable. Like, the Juma bags, despite the fact that you're getting doubles and triples of stuff, is far better than anything we've seen so far. Do you agree?
I think Juma bags and like Zoc boxes from running your MEs, Ws, and FEs is a big bonus to the game, because it does just give you pieces of gear that are actually usable, and especially when you can get, at least on console right now, some of those high ticket items like Staff of Flowers, Octuria's music box, things like that out of Zoc boxes, and then with the Juma bags being able to get at least some of your BIS gears, like you can get the boots that are BIS for like DPS and things like that out of those, and so actually giving you the opportunity to get the best in slot gear just from running through the campaign and turning in those Juma bags or buying those Juma bags seems like a beneficial thing, especially when you maybe aren't getting those from the dungeon. So it's kind of like a supplemental thing. So you do have a little bit of reward constantly without having the complete just mind-numbing experience of trying to smash dungeons as much as you possibly can to get the drop.
Yeah, I mean,
I would say.
Go ahead.
Okay, I would say that Juma bags are a good solution to a problem that shouldn't exist. In a sense that I think it might be better for the game if the hunts were, more frequent, and you could actually go directly, hunt the monster and have it good confidence that you can get the thematic rewards out of it more frequently than once in what it is, 6 minutes or 8 minutes or what. So that period of time is just too long. And also we had this one hunt mob who actually refused to show up at all. So if you wanted those rewards, you kind of had to earn the Juma boxes, open up like 20, 30 or 40 of them, and hope for the right drop out of those. So the box themselves, I was never totally disappointed in having them and opening them. But as I said, I think it's a good solution to a problem that shouldn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot more stuff. Like, and this is what Angli had probably to know, is that So the Juma boxes versus the Zuma, like the Zoc boxes, the Juma boxes had like coal wards drop in them, 3 legendary keys, mounts, and companions. They're all count bound, but the pool like was far larger, like in that particular thing than it has been in anything so far as I can tell.
Which seems to be like, and it's a good thing, just because you are getting some of those things that you need. Like everyone needs cold wards, unless you're 100% end game and you're not leveling up enchants anymore. Even still, you're gonna take a cold ward because it's a payday for you, unless it's account bound, obviously. But kind of like what Haden was saying, it becomes a band-aid solution for something that maybe shouldn't have existed in the first place. Like we shouldn't have needed a supplemental gear income. Like we basically just created SSID for for Neverwinter in the sense of like, now you have to do these because you have a better chance of getting the things that you want out of these boxes rather than killing the mob that you need to kill, running the dungeon that you need to run. And so it puts less emphasis on dungeons than running the hunts, running the content.
Well, so the thing is and Hayden's not wrong in this point, and I kind of agree with that. It's a band-aid on something that shouldn't exist as far as the gear goes, right? But I honestly think that the Juma bags are a bit of an experiment. So the Zoc boxes are obviously something that you can only do so often per character, right? You're only going to do 3 Emmys on a character in a day, maximum of 2 Wiis and 2 Fees. So really, at your best day, you're not going to get more than 7 Zoc boxes, right? Whereas Juma, I mean, you can farm that stuff all day long and buy bags. And I've had cold wards, pres wards, companion upgrade tokens, legendary dragon keys, mounts, companions, all drop from Juma bags. And I think it was an experiment to see if we make a big reward loot table, is this something people are going to like stay in the game for and farm incessantly? And the answer is yes, right?
I know.
And some of us, we get to the point where we're like, really, is the time worth it at this point because all it's bound? And so some people are kind of backing off of it now that, once they have X many copies of gear, they could have probably upped some of the rarer rewards in there, dropped the gear out of those Juma bags, and it still probably would have been farmed incessantly, right?
And it also did.
Sure.
It also did cover over some of the problems where, for example, for the first couple of weeks, like one of the hunt targets wasn't available to actually. It wasn't populating, but people could still get that drop like out of the Juma bag, right?
Yeah. And to Alan's point, the hunts were super frustrating. I mean, I tracked on a spreadsheet how many abominations I killed. I have so far killed 120 abominations, and gotten 2 of the rusted iron legging drops, 2 gear drops off of, that many hunt kills.
But that was you.
Yeah, totally agree. No. But the drop rate, and actually, it's the problem of having RNG on top of RNG. So you kind of need to wait first for the spawn, hoping that it actually is the hunt spawn, the rare one, and then after killing it, you have to hope that it actually drops the gear that you want out of it instead of nothing or just some seals or something. Right. And this actually makes it really, really frustrating to engage with it and actually dig into it and just go and do it and enjoy the process. So yeah.
Maybe
one other thing I wanted to say in addition to Willow's observation about it being an experiment, it very well may be, but if it's actually an experiment, it didn't go far enough. I mean, a proper experiment would probably be an A/B experiment where you have 2 options. One is to grind and buy the Juma boxes and open up, whereas the other would be the accessibility of similar loot table by doing something else in a world, like a mini dungeon in the map, or those hunt mobs coming in elite formation or whatever, something different, something that's more related directly to the adventure part, and then it would be a proper A/B testing what people are engaging more with.
Okay. So Angeli, what was one of the things that you found that in the rewards that you thought deserved some extra attention?
I think that as far as like rewards and progression and things like that, and Willow kind of touched on this in his stream earlier. I was lurking in there while I was eating lunch. But having a more like horizontal progression rather than this huge like spike of constant power creep, um, just because it makes it so hard to maintain new gaming base. Um, and I think that's a huge problem with the turnover in the game right now, is because people come in, play for a couple of weeks, still don't know what the heck is going on because there's just this huge power creep. And like Willow was saying earlier, when you're running the level appropriate dungeons, you have level 80s that are at top end, potentially top end gear, running through these dungeons, and you don't do anything if you're a new player. You're just
Mhm.
like kind of following in their wake and collecting the refinement points that the guy probably doesn't really even care about, you know. And so you're just filling him up with the random rolls. Um, and so I think having a much more um, progression is going to be a lot better than having this constant vertical, always the power creep, always everything has to be going up. And just kind of in an analogy to that is that we, as Neverwinter, tried to build vertically with a very small base, but the
Mhm.
tallest buildings have the widest bases. And so we basically have an inverted pyramid right now where the top end community is actually some of the larger portion of the community right now, and making the new player community very small because they constantly leave because they don't know what they're doing. They have no way of knowing, and they come in and they're confused, where it should be the opposite, where you've got your lower end to mid range guys is a lot more than the top end people.
I would say it's not even really a pyramid; it's more of a diamond, because we get a lot of end game players that just leave. So we've got a lot of like high mid game players in the game, and we got a lot of there's a lot of mid game players, but there's
Yeah,
very
I can
few
agree to that.
people. We get a lot of turnover in veterans, and we get a lot of like, I mean, multi-year veterans, and we get a lot of turnover, I believe, in new players. I've seen a lot of that, especially in the last year.
Well, and I think some of the biggest parts of it is, some of it is just player based by nature.
Hmm.
Where, like me, I've been playing since it's come out on console, so
Right.
just over 5 years now, and I played a little bit on PC beforehand. Um, and obviously, I've taken my breaks just like everyone has. But I don't I don't understand the whole, oh, I got bored with the game thing. Like there's so much to do in this game that
Hmm.
they're like, especially with the content that they've been rolling out, like every 3 months you're getting new content. Um, Usually the people that are leaving the game because of like boredom or things like that, or quote unquote lack of progression,
Hmm.
are people that maybe only play one character, which that
I,
there's nothing wrong with that, but they only have one character where it's just like, you realize there's 7 other classes that you can play, right? you know,
I,
um,
and I and honestly, I think you actually hit something right there. And that's something I mentioned on stream a couple times. It is actually highly beneficial to players to have more than one character. Um, and it's not only from like the boredom aspect. Like, yeah, if you have one character, you're going to hit a point where you're going to have large periods of boredom while you're waiting for new content to drop. But if you're working on and playing and experimenting with multiple characters, even 3 or 4 characters, you're going to be pretty busy unless you're like a full-time gamer.
well, and the other aspect of it is from a progression standpoint, is you actually become a better player by playing the other classes. Like
Agreed.
I tell every person that says, "Oh, I only DPS," I tell them, make a support class. For the love of God, make a support class,
Hmm.
because you actually understand what the support classes are doing for you. That, you know, maybe going
Hmm.
back to a little bit mod 15 analogy here, but you swinging that big sword doesn't hit as hard when you don't have the buffs, my guy. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and so play a support class, actually look at it from a different perspective, and you'll actually learn how to play your main class better
Hmm.
because you're playing those other classes. And now you know timing. So when you hear that oh from the cleric, you're like, okay,
Hmm.
it's time to tee off, you
Right.
know, and so you just start learning how to play your tunes a lot better.
Hmm.
Fact of um, you know, you're prayer cycling on multiple tunes, which potentially means more pres wards, more coal wards from the Vault of Piety,
Hmm.
which can increase progression in your main tune or in all of your tunes at that point. Um, and it just my personal opinion is if you're bored, you're a boring person. Because there is so much to do in this game. There are other classes to play. There's other content to push through. There are other things that need to be worked on that may be monotonous, but you know, not all alliances are full of level 20 guilds. How about you go and help them out? You know, run influence for some of your other alliance members. You know, do things
Hmm.
like that. There's a lot of things that can be done in this game that people just may or may not do because it's monotonous or quote unquote boring. But there is content to do. It's just because you're not doing top tier content 24/7, it's boring.
So let me ask you this: like, so you're talking about horizontal progression. That was the thing you were bringing up. Like, in horizontal, like, how does that fit? Like, so what would you consider like a reward that would be horizontal? Like, was there something that you saw in there that in the CDP? Because I mean, that one of the things that I noticed pretty predominantly in most of the rewards, like suggestions that were made, is that most of them were not horizontal. Most of them were all vertical.
Well, and that's going to be the hard thing is um everyone's looking for those chase items. They're looking for that power spike, right? And so trying to establish some sort of less of that, like just minimizing the amount of need for those chase items, where you can have, you know, either whether it's unique or customizable items that are, um, you know, to take us back to mod 6 and sorcel items that they were good weapons as you level up, which kind of gave you a more horizontal plane rather than having to wait for these big peaks and valleys of the power spikes. Like, oh, I have to get to level 60 to get my first artifact set, and then once I get to level 70, I get a new artifact set, and then
Hmm.
once I get to 80, now I've got a new artifact set. Now once I'm 24k, I can go and get Lionheart weapons. Like, it's these huge peaks and valleys rather than just having a much more flat linear progression where it's, you know, not, you know, a herringbone situation where it's maybe more of a just a nice gradual incline.
So that,
Right, and
mhm.
that's where having kind of a store ties in too, where you don't have to necessarily again drop those gear pieces or artifacts or whatever in the dungeon directly, but it could be something that rarely drops. And then when you're talking about horizontal rewards, you're talking about, okay, this item really isn't more powerful than this other item, but it's unique, it's different, it might change your gameplay and gives you more options, right? So maybe I'm just, again, this is kind of just as an example.
Mhm.
This is an actual suggestion. Let's say you've got a ranged class, and you get an item that only works on ranged powers, but you have to be within 10 feet, right? So
Mhm.
you have to be point blank
So
but
it's a
ranged.
controlled wizard action item, is
It,
what you're saying.
or a ranged ranger, but I'm giving an example of like, so this item is just as powerful as this other item, but it comes with, you know,
A
some
trade-off.
gameplay mechanics. Yeah, trade
Yeah,
off, right?
a unique bonus.
Right.
Yeah, and that could definitely diversify
Mm-hmm.
the game. And you were talking about this in your stream too, of the illusion of choice, in the sense of like taking away some of the um, you know, the feats and things like that, changing, reducing the illusion of choice, because basically even when we had the original feat system, you were, if you weren't running one of the two main builds, you just weren't going to outperform anybody, except
Right.
on very rare circumstances. And so having that illusion of choice, and now that is basically gone, where Now you basically run one of two ways, and one of those two ways is picking which path you go on per class, pretty much. And so the taking away that, but then having these items with unique bonuses help diversify the playstyle. Where you're not using you're using all the same powers, but now instead of an Arcanist control wizard standing at 50 feet and just pounding a boss, put him at 10 feet, make him change his mechanic,
Mm-hmm.
or the same thing with a ranger, archer making, it could potentially make it so that an archery ranger is a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more viable than the combat or the mixed stance.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you could, like, I mean, actually, when you bring that piece up, like, you could actually have two pieces that are the exact same, like, as far as stats go. One being, range powers within 10 feet give you 5% damage bonus. But then another piece that say range powers give you 3% damage, like, if you're outside 25 feet. Right? Like, two pieces. So then all of a sudden they're making a choice of, are they going to be an enclosed like ranger, and then are they going to be one that's going to stand outside range? And there are different benefits to each, and you're going to be chasing one or the other piece, or maybe both, or what, depending on how you actually play whatever your play style is.
And you could even do it differently in terms of, like, not it just being damage, like, say, hey, you do 5% increased damage. This is the risk that because you're within 10 feet as a control wizard wearing a t-shirt and jeans, you're not wearing armor, just t-shirt and jeans. Be at 10 feet, you get increased damage.
Right.
But if you choose to be beyond 25 feet or say at 50 feet, you get maybe increased AP gain.
Okay.
So you have a risk versus reward, where it's just like, hey, so if I'm standing at 25 feet, I could potentially pop off my daily a little bit faster. But if I'm standing at 10 feet, I'm dealing 5% more damage.
Yeah, those are
well. And I am a big fan of gear that has trade-offs. It's like, I think we're at the point in the game where the devs honestly do not need to increase enemy stat ratings on enemies. They can just start introducing new gear that's basically the same stats as all the old gear, but then now start putting new unique bonuses on, right? Again, it could be AP gain, it could be damage gain or whatever, but it comes with a penalty. So let's say,
like the boots having more damage, best in slot boots, more damage output, but at minus 25% incoming healing.
Right.
Or the chest piece that you deal 10% more damage, but now you're taking 10% more damage.
Exactly.
So you're just having these trade-offs where you have to, and then that kind of also goes into what you're talking about in your stream today as well, of forcing people to play together. Because if you're having that much reduced incoming healing and you're taking 10% more damage, you might want a pocket healer. even just to run hunts, like, you may want a pocket healer just because you're not going to be healing yourself for as much with your passive regen, and you're going to be taking more damage.
Yep.
So it just kind of forces people to possibly play together and utilize those mechanics.
And then I would introduce new gear along with that is lower item level, lower stat gear that has no bonus on it at all, right? So that just becomes your plain Jane gear. If you really want to run solo, you can run it, but guess what? You're not going to be as powerful.
So basically making just a slightly less powerful item of the same gear without the bonus is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So it's like you could still have the same boots with, say, 500 less of each stat, minus the bonus, and just run that so that you can run your solo content. But then when you go into dungeons, you can have your top tier, your best in slot, maximum stats with the bonus.
Yep.
Gotcha. Yeah, that sounds, that sounds, as far as like risk reward and rewards and progression, giving yourself those options sounds like a good way to go.
Willow. So yeah, unless Haden has one, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I mean, I actually wrote a post about vertical versus horizontal progression on CDP. In a nutshell, I would say that if you have two different pieces of gear and you can compare them and ask yourself which one is better, and the answer is kind of obvious. One is indeed can be said that it's universally better than the other. Then that, in a nutshell, is vertical progression. It's obviously the right choice to go with a better version of the gear. On the other hand, if you can take a look at those two items, and the only question that makes sense is how are they different, or what are they situational in different situations, so you cannot basically compare them and say one is always better than the other. Then that is, in essence, is the horizontal progression we are talking about. It is about giving you more options, more customization to your play style. I would also include maybe having access to more encounter powers for your class. So notice that Neverwinter actually does it already while you're leveling up. It is actually that the opening up of new encounter powers that you don't have access from level 1 as you level to level 80 is actually horizontal progression. It's just that Neverwinter stops horizontal progression, mostly stops when you reach maximum level, instead of basically doing the vertical progression in the beginning and then kind of leaning into more horizontal progression as you reach max level and start going into the end game.
Okay.
So you could be looking at more like potentially making a skill tree in that sense, trying to make horizontal progression where there's actually something to build towards once you do reach the level 80. Just for an example, this is obviously way more advanced than what we would be talking about, like Path of Exile, where you have that huge massive skill tree that as you level up, as you gain points, you can put things and try and build to a different to benefit different powers, or like you said, adding extra powers that as you get your experience rewards, whatever, get a certain amount of, they kind of took away power points, but having something like that to actually build into once you are to level 80.
Sure. I mean, for me, the perfect game actually would have multiple avenues of horizontal progression, so I could pick and choose which direction I want to take my character in while adventuring and collecting, more experience in addition to better gear.
Yeah, the PowerPoint system, was very horizontal, and in fact, like, I can think of one particular thing, like off the top of my head, where I think it was the opposite of the Storm Cloud on the Ranger, where if you, like, the more points you had in it, the lesser the debuff was, like, on you when you did that damage boost. Do you remember on that? That was a melee power.
Throw caution.
Throw caution, yeah.
Throw caution, yeah.
So that is a perfect example of what horizontal progression would be, where there's a base thing, and then you can either improve it, or if it's a trade-off, you could decrease its like negative effect on you over time.
Sure, and we had similar things in Feat 3 as well for at least one of the classes.
Yeah.
Probably Wizard, something about single target versus AoE powers and damage.
And then that wouldn't actually, I don't know how of a big a deal that would be even with the feats now, since they've simplified the feat tree so much. I mean, there are trade-offs that are in them. So I mean, that could be a system that they could implement, I would think, even using the existing tree.
Totally, well, it's not out of the it even wouldn't be out of ordinary. Let's remind us all that what we're currently seeing as the feat system, actually it is only a first pass, isn't it? I mean, they didn't have enough time to actually do multiple passes and polish it and rethink some of the decisions and make it all better, make it balanced and everything. It's very raw. It's very just the first pass of something that can work. It is put together. And it was released because we needed the content for Mod 16, right?
Right. I mean, they said it themselves back when Mod 16 launched that basically they had to redo the basement, right? So we're looking at the base, we're looking at the foundation right now. Right?
Yeah.
And that just kind of alludes back to what I was talking about with the horizontal progression of trying to build that wide base, because I think, Chris came in and realized that we were very narrow at the base and trying to build this super tall, super robust structure with a very narrow foundation. So now they're going back and trying to, widen it out, making sure the foundation is actually going to be able to support what we want to build here as a game and as a community.
Okay, so Willow, let's like, what about you? So, was there something in particular that you found that you wanted to highlight, or is it? Are we already touched on all your touchstones?
I mean, we've touched on pretty much all of my rewards based touch points. With the currency store, some of the chase rewards. Um, yeah, I mean, we've touched on all of those things that really popped out at me as being kind of fundamental to the game. But I do kind of want to like preface this a little bit. I don't see rewards as necessarily being what makes a game fun. I see them as kind of the carrot at the end to get us through some of the less fun stuff at times, and to feel good about, hey, we just conquered this content and here's our reward for doing a good job, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, Rewards, while they can be a chase item, again, a chase kind of says that right there in itself, in the very word, that it's something that we're getting through, we're grinding through, we're putting our head down, charging forward to get through this stuff so we can get the reward. So the rewards are the excuse we use to repeatedly do things that are less pleasant. In and of itself, I think rewards are very important to keep people playing, but having fun dungeons, having uh, good group mechanics, working together as teams, those are the things, and having non-bugged mechanics are the things that keep the game fun, right? And having that variety, having the choice, and some of that comes down to progression, and touching on those other things. But without that freedom of choice, and just like right now, the current state of the game is we are very vanilla. There's not a lot of choice in any individual class, um, without a significant downside. Um, there's a little bit more coming in, like the ranged ranger is a little bit more viable now than it used to be. If I'm running by myself, some of the classes, some of the alternate paragons are a little more viable. Uh, but there's very little choice inside of any individual paragon to really change your play style and not be a liability to a group. And once you are a liability to a group, it becomes less fun for you and less fun for the group.
Okay, so let me pose this question then to all three of you, and you're all going to get a chance to answer before we end the stream. So we know that the CDP 3, the one we just finished, which was rewards and progression, it's not going to be implemented until like January, right, of next year. It's on. That's what it shows up on the roadmap. So, how important is it that you think like this particular thing is? Like, do you think it's worth any development time, like, or taking away from some of the other things that are in the roadmap between now and January, that, it'd be added to like the new module that they're doing? I mean, I know this is going to be a topic that probably will come up like in the next dev stream. But I'm curious, what do you think, like, how important do you think it would be to sacrifice some things that are in the roadmap to maybe make some of these rewards like as part of the new module coming out of Vernus? Haden?
Sure. I mean, it's almost for me like a no-brainer. Of course, it's worthwhile, but it's really a pick and choose when it comes to basically being content with a low lying fruit only. I mean, if something seems like a good idea, but it takes extensive development time to achieve, then it probably shouldn't be pushed forward or put on top of the to-do list. On the other hand, if something is currently worthwhile doing, because it kind of hurts the game, or the game would be that much better with it developed, and it's actually quite easy to do, or quite simple, then by all means, I'm saying it should be included in much earlier development.
Willow?
So, yeah, I'm just trying to phrase this the way I want to phrase it. Looking at the roadmap, the big sweeping changes out of these first couple of CDPs are not going to hit until next January, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'd be willing to bet real world money that a lot of what's coming out of the VIP CDP, as well as this reward and progression CDP, is actually going to be worked in much earlier than you think. I think we're going to see some changes as early as now, right? We could start seeing some patches where some of this stuff gets worked in. And we've already seen some of the responsiveness, like the neck and belt set that's coming out of IC, the Infernal Citadel. That got changed directly due to feedback that we had as streamers, as well as posts that we were making on the forums, right?
Mm-hmm.
The devs have better visibility with the CDP to the mindset in the community than they've ever had before, because they're maybe being told that they have to, right? And I think it's going to have a positive impact, and we're going to see some of these things worked in. But again, the big sweeping stuff, if there's going to be a superstore, that's a big if. It wouldn't be until next January, right? There's that being said, there's a few things that were kind of disappointing in the rewards CDP, rewards and progression is, one of the things we had asked for is, hey, can you give us an idea of how many loot tables guys are actively managing? Can you give us an idea of what's on some of these loot tables? Can we publish some of these loot tables on queues? Because there's things that new players come in and they're like, hey, what's this really cool thing? Where do I get it? And then you're like, unless it's an experienced player,
No
go
idea.
find it.
Yeah, no
right?
idea.
Yeah, no idea.
Yeah, I know. Angli.
I think that some of these rewards and progressions, they are necessary. I don't think that you should sacrifice roadmap items to do it. Just because, in my opinion, that if you're going to do it, it needs to be done right. I feel like in the past, as a community and as a game, we've kind of just pushed out content to push out content, and it hasn't been the greatest. And I think that's something that we're now trying to get away from. That we're actually getting back to storytelling and having a good quality content, not just saying, hey, every 3 months we're going to push out this content no matter whether it's finished or not. And it's kind of just one of those things that it's just like progress for the sake of progress isn't always the best thing. Just because you want to push forward when there's really no reason to push forward doesn't mean that it needs to happen. But I think if they're going to do it, it needs to be done right, and it needs to be done well. And that's I know that's kind of negative, as opposed to your guys' very positive points on that. But it's something that could be very very game changing for us as players and as a community and as a game. That I think not taking away from the roadmap is a good idea, but then making sure that this gets done right when this is implemented is going to be the biggest thing that they need to do. Not just try and slam bang it together and just to throw a band-aid on a gushing wound.
No, but I think the point was, like, the last thing we talked about was about horizontal progression and how choice and stuff could be made when it comes to actually equipment. So we know that there's a new trial that's coming out in June. The rewards in that particular campaign could be an eye towards moving the direction there, and that would be a change in both rewards and progression. Like, as part of that, like a lot of the larger system changes that we're talking about is, from a feat perspective, or like a superstore or any of those other ones, probably because they're more system wide, would probably have to wait like till the regular time, which would be January. But I mean, you could look at stuff like this experiment, like on the juke, like on the box, on the bags dropping, and offering like a more of a variety with not necessarily increasing the stats on gear, like in the new release into Avernus. That's what I'm saying. As far as, I don't know if that would I don't know that that's hard to implement, but that would be something that would have to be brought up and talked about, like in the dev.
Oh yeah, very much so. Like the small things that, like, I have no problem with the implementation of the stuff that's simple and easy to fix, but I was thinking as far as like basically unloading all of this content
Mm,
at one time, it needs to be done right. Like if
right.
you're just going to try and wait until January to implement all this stuff, it needs to be done right, and I would rather them just take their time on it and get it done right and get it done well
That might,
than
yeah, and that would,
than just to push out content.
and that might be on the feet, like on the heads of, getting people earlier into like a closed beta, and then maybe running even like a preview for a longer period of time before January, potentially.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of the that's one of the downsides of being a console player is that we don't get access to preview. We don't, we kind of just um, we get to see it when you guys get to see it. That's so when it's actually released on PC is when we finally get to see it. But most of you guys get the preview access, so you guys know what you're kind of playing with before you even get full release. Um, and so that's one of the negative sides to it, especially from a console perspective. Of we have to basically sit around and wait
Well,
until you guys get it on PC to try and figure it out. Other than trying to read about it on the preview forums or things like that.
Nova, like for example, like Nova, for example, has like a character like in preview, and the devs are pretty forgiving. They gear him up to do it. So if you're interested in, if you're a console player and you're interested in actually being involved in the closed beta on PC, just because you're not PC, don't feel like you can't get access. It has to be part of the closed beta. They will gear you up.
Definitely.
And
I mean, I'm downloading Neverwinter on the PC right now as we speak.
okay,
So.
but I'm just saying, like that's you're talking open preview, but like even in the beta, like the devs and the people that are running it, because the stuff's free, right? They have no problem gearing you up with like mounts and gear and all kinds of stuff, whatever you think you need to build out your character right. So don't let that be a barrier to be a part of the solution. Is basically what I'm saying.
Oh, definitely. And like me, I guess I have the slight naivety of um, and at least from my perspective, it seems until recently, the diversity between the PC master race and the console master race has been a very closed off borders until it's seemingly very recently. We've been cordial with each other, but now it seems like there's a huge exchange of information back and forth across any platform, back and forth between devs to players and things like that. And so now that the borders have kind of opened, there's none of this weird gatekeeping kind of aspect anymore. That it's a lot different. That maybe people like me who maybe aren't as connected as like Nova
Mm-hmm.
didn't know that those opportunities existed to console players, or like, hey, if I just make a character on PC, can I get into the preview? Like, that's some things that maybe the average console player doesn't know that they have access to.
Yeah, so that's why we're making it known now.
Well,
mm-hmm.
I don't know that the average console player would, without some connections, would necessarily be able to get quite that easily geared up. They would probably have to know someone on PC, get an invite to the closed beta, and then once you're in, it's a small enough team that the devs could probably hook you up. But you got to get there first, right?
Yeah, with Nova, that's a completely different case, because I think he's been the only console player that's been invited to Cryptic.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a little bit different story with Nova, but yeah, as far as the average, or maybe a little bit above average console player, those avenues didn't seem like avenues until this kind of open forum has been established. So
cool. Well, I mean, I think that's it. Thank you very much all for joining me today.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you for hosting.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome as always. And so we'll say, anyone have anything they want to like shout out before we say goodbye to everybody? Angli?
Maybe one thing, I was thinking about what Angli said earlier about not all change being necessarily a good thing. In my opinion, the change should drive player agency. So players should be more in control of their hero's journey across the world. And any changes that support this would actually be, beneficial to the game and should be fast forwarded as much as possible. Of course, quality shouldn't suffer, but still, yeah.
Cool.
And we're gonna see changes in the next year. Some of them are going to be good, and some of them we're not going to like as players. But
Definitely.
as long as they benefit the health of the game, at the end of the day, we should be acceptant of those.
Very true.
Okay.
And I think one of the biggest things like right now is we're trying to progress and move forward in this game, trying to make it into the best MMO. I'm 100% on board with Chris's kind of platform as far as like, let's make Neverwinter the best MMO on the internet, on the planet. And so we're not going backwards. We're not going back to mod 15. We're not going back to mod 16. Mod 17 is dead on Tuesday for everybody. Like, we're moving forward. And it's just, I think as a community, it's just time to embrace that we're moving forward, we're not going back, and that we need to just get on board with the direction that the game is going.
All right, and with that, I will say goodbye. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Right.
See ya.